welcome on Halloween to a topic that is
Scary.
very highly unusual.
We didn't plan this very well, did we?
Some graveyards appropriate for Halloween. And I think you will find this to be probably one of the most unique groups that you have ever encountered.
No pressure.
And what their motivation is and how they carry it out. And I'm going to give you Rachel and Elaine. Right? And Masha's here. Masha, you remember from several weeks ago when she was getting her information from her family, she turned to this group and got some help. So that's how I found out about it. And here they are to tell you for themselves.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Rachel McRae, and I'm with my fellow board member Elaine Brown, and we are part of the board of the Matzevah Foundation, and several of our board actually lives here in the Middle Tennessee area. So we do have some other board members that live in Atlanta and in Texas and in Poland, which is a good thing. But we're so grateful to be here today, and I'm thankful for your invitation and Marcia's recommendation. And so when the group emailed, I was like, you do realize we're not like Nashville history, like we go to Poland. And she said, absolutely, you know, but when she was telling me about the group, you sound like our kind of people. We are history junkies at the Matzevah Foundation, just personally and professionally and all. And so we're just excited to be here to share about the work that we do. And I honestly didn't think until you just said, you gave us 2 or 3 date options. We picked this one, never thinking about Halloween cemetery. So I guess it's, depending on your view of Halloween, it's a happy coincidence. But
All Saints Eve.
And All Saints Eve, yes. And that is a big holiday in Poland for sure. A lot of our friends will be marking that tomorrow. So we're going to tell you a little bit about our organization, how it started, and just what the heck we do. And so it all started back in early 2000s. Our current president, Dr. Stephen Reese, he lives in Atlanta right now. He and his family were actually living and working in the Warsaw area. He was a pastor in the area, and he would, each summer, he would bring teams from the States over to work with him, do like children's clubs, sports camps, just things normal, what we call mission trips. And at the end of one of these weeks, they were staying at a hotel in a suburb of Warsaw, and this lady who worked at the hotel and in the restaurant was just really impressed by the group of young people that were there that week. And she came over to Stephen, and Stephen's very fluent in Polish, and was talking to her and said, you should take these young people to see our cemetery in town. We have a Jewish cemetery, you should see it. And so he was like, well, that's random. Nothing about us looks Jewish, nothing, I was like, why in the world would she say that to me? And so he wanted to investigate more, so he asked her a question. And I'm not gonna pronounce Polish. You don't want an East Tennessee girl attempting Polish because I will butcher it. But the question was, Madam, are you of Jewish descent? And she kind of looked around the room a little bit, and she leaned down and whispered to him very softly and said, yes, I am, and there's many of us in hiding. And I believe this was 2004. And so he was just very impressed by that. So he did, in fact, take the young people to see the Jewish cemetery. And it was in Oatwolks, Poland, again, it's a suburb of Warsaw. And as he stood there, he felt something just come over him that he didn't know what, but he was like, why should a Jewish cemetery be important to me, especially as a Christian? Why should I care about Jewish cemeteries? Why are cemeteries important to my Jewish neighbor, to the Jewish faith? And so that began a quest that ended up changing his life. He began to research about why cemeteries are important to the Jewish faith. And he just was so impressed by this and wanted to help this particular cemetery that was in a lot of disarray. And so he began bringing volunteer teams over to specifically clean the Jewish cemeteries. And that's how Elaine and I and 3 others from the Nashville area got involved. And so for several years we worked in this cemetery. And this is in Oatwolks. It's not a huge cemetery, but a lot of the headstones or Matzevah are flipped over, they're cracked, they're fallen over. There's a lot of grass that's just grown up. I mean, it's just neglected. And so we worked there for 2 or 3 years. And then Stephen ended up, oh, I can go back.
Yeah.
Stephen and his family ended up moving back to the States. But several of us wanted to continue working. Elaine and I and the people here in Nashville as well, a few others, we just wanted to keep working. We didn't want this to just stop because, as we say, we drank the Kool-Aid and we wanted to keep doing it. And so for a few years, we worked in Warsaw at the Okapowa Street Jewish Cemetery. And this is basically in the heart of the city. It's the second largest Jewish cemetery in Europe. There's an estimated 250,000 people buried here. There are 2 known mass graves, and so a lot of those numbers are accounted for in those mass graves. But this gave us an outlet to continue working and meeting people, meeting organizations in Warsaw specifically that cared for cemeteries. And so we're busy working. We go over each summer. Stephen's in Atlanta, and he just feels called to, we want to keep this work going. So he gathered a bunch of us. We met down in Chattanooga and basically formed the idea of a nonprofit. And so that's how the Matzevah Foundation was born. We were established in late 2010. And so we're about to turn 13 in a couple weeks, heading into the terrible teen years. So basically this is our mission statement, that we seek to remember and honor the Jewish heritage of Poland by restoring Jewish cemeteries and reconciling Jews and Christians through participating in a common mitzvah or good deed. So basically, to sum that up, we focus on really 3 things: remembering, restoring, and reconciling. So that kind of is our 3 pillars. So here's a picture of our board after a fashion. Most of the real people we live here in town. The gentleman in the back, that's Stephen Reese. He's our president. He lives in Atlanta. The dog lives here too. And so we meet twice a year. In one of those meetings, we always meet here. And so this was our most recent Nashville meeting. The other 3, one lives in Georgia, one lives in Texas, and one lives in Warsaw. So needless to say, the Warsaw friend doesn't get over as much as we would like. And so when we say we are remembering, what are we remembering? We want to remember the wonderful Jewish heritage that Poland has. Poland was very welcoming to Jews for many, many years. It was a happy place for them to live. Prior to the war, about 13% of Poland's total population was Jewish, and it boasted one of the largest Jewish populations in the world. Today, there's an estimated 20 to 25,000 Jews living in Poland, so definitely a big drop from pre-war, and that's definitely caused by the Shoah, people immigrating before and after the war. But again, Poland had a beautiful, vibrant Jewish community all across the country. And we also want to remember why there aren't many Jews in Poland and in a lot of other countries in Europe. And that's due to the Holocaust. And you might occasionally hear us switch the words Holocaust and Shoah. Just as an FYI, I mean, this is a learning that I learned thanks to Stephen back when we started working together. The word Holocaust in Hebrew means burnt offering, which is a horrible description of what happened, because the lives of all those people, that was not an offering. When you think of an offering as a beautiful gift that you're giving to someone, the Holocaust was anything but that. Whereas the word Shoah means catastrophe, and that is definitely much more descriptive of what it is. So if I interchange the 2, it's basically referring to the same thing. But so Poland lost 10% of its total population during the war, whereas the Jewish faith lost 90% of its entire population worldwide. And so you can just see the devastation that's had. And so that's the 6 million Jews that the number that you hear a lot when referencing how many people died from the Jewish side during the war. And while most concentration and death camps started a couple years into the war, the Holocaust began basically when the war began in the fall of '39. Jews were rounded up wherever they were living in towns. They were taken in the streets, and a lot of them were beaten, a lot of them were killed. Maybe they were forced out of town into a field or a forest, and where they were shot. And so sometimes you might hear the phrase Holocaust by bullets. And so a lot of times that's used to kind of describe especially those first couple of years of the war, because that's how the Jews were killed in those initial years. And it was during that time that the Nazis were determining their final solution, which was, incorporating making their plans for the mass extermination of Jews all across Europe. And so when we say we're restoring, what are we wanting to restore? And for us, we focus on Jewish cemeteries in Poland by cleaning them, and we conduct commemorations as well. And I'll go into those two aspects in a minute. But we like to mobilize volunteers from all over the world. We have a lot of volunteers that come from America. We've had them from Canada, Uruguay, Israel, Australia is where the Narcissus family is from, France and England. But honestly, 75% of our volunteers are local Polish people. A lot of people are students. We work with high school students or college, university age students. And so Stephen was kind of doing some work on our volunteer list. He's like, I think easily 75% of these are local Poles, which is so exciting because we want local Poles to be caring for their own cemeteries, and they don't need crazy Americans like us coming over and helping them. We also work with descendants, and I think I can speak for Elaine that those are probably some of our most favorite projects, is when we get to work with a descendant. If someone comes to us and says, we want to care for the cemetery in my grandfather's hometown, how do we go about doing that? Sometimes it's just putting them in contact with the right people. Other times we have partnered with them. They pull up their own team of family and friends, and we meet them over there and we do the project together. We live together in a house or in a hotel together. And we work together in the cemetery to restore it. And those are some of our most favorite treasured projects, is when we get to work with descendants and their families. And then our third pillar is we want to seek reconciliation. Again, that can be between Jews and Poles, between Poles and, or between Jews and Christian, and between neighbor and neighbor. I mean, isn't reconciliation always needed, no matter what's going on in the world, and especially today? I mean, reconciliation is definitely needed. And so the two greatest commandments that are given in the Torah, and for us, I think all of us on the board, we are all Christians, so none of us are Jewish, but it's our two greatest commandments given as well, is to love God and to love your neighbor. And the Shoah still affects relationships today between Christians and Jews. We've seen it, we feel it in Poland. We know other places in the world feel it. And so we seek to bridge that divide, to just have a way to, a platform to have dialogue with each other. And a cemetery has turned out to be that place where people who have a heart for some aspect of it, whether it's this is their family cemetery, or I have a love of history, or I want to know more about the Holocaust or the history of my hometown that I live in Poland. And the working together in the cemetery has opened up all kinds of interesting dialogue between us and our volunteers and everybody, that sometimes it's just about where you live, what's life like, in Nashville, or what's life like in that city in Poland, to really talking about what happened in this town, what was the Jewish history, what are the Jewish roots of this town, and why should it be important to you who still live here, kind of thing. And so yeah, we want to have dialogue, we want to have friendship, we want to, just have good community while we're working on a project. So you may be wondering, why are the cemeteries in Poland in such bad shape that you have to go over there and care for them? And usually it's one of two things. Some of them are honestly left almost as they were after World War II. When the Nazis came in, when the Jewish community is first established in a new place, two of the first things that the community does is to build a synagogue and to buy land for a cemetery. The first thing that the Nazis would do when they rolled into a new town was to destroy the synagogue and to destroy the cemetery. And so a lot of those cemeteries were taken apart, their gates were smashed, the headstones were removed and were used for paving a sidewalk or being a foundation of a building that the Nazis may have needed to store their ammunition or to store their horses. There was just no care or respect for these sacred grounds. In some cemeteries today, most of them are not protected in any way. They're overgrown with vegetation. They are used as footpaths for the community to get from one place to another. They are used as trash dumps. People sit around and drink and do drugs. We've seen it. We've happened upon that before. In a lot of these places, it's very evident that this is a cemetery. You wouldn't do that in the cemetery where your family's buried, but they have no qualms of doing it for a Jewish cemetery, which is very disheartening. And so, but why is this important to us? Why is this important to the Jewish faith? And I apologize if there should be any Jewish brothers and sisters in here, and if I get anything wrong, please tell me. I would love to know. But caring for the dead is one of the 613 laws that Jews were given to abide by, and there's over 1,200 Jewish cemeteries in Poland. And if you remember, the number of estimated Jews in Poland right now is less than 25,000. It's not very many people to care for a whole lot of cemeteries that are spread hither and yon all over the country. And so, so that's a need of why we want to go, is we want to help, we want to serve. But also caring for the dead is one of the highest expressions of loving kindness in the Jewish faith. You're doing something for someone who can't repay you. You're caring for a cemetery gate. You're repainting something. You are pulling the weeds from around a grave that you don't know who this person is. You're doing something for them that there's no way for them to repay you. And so that really resonated with us. And so loving kindness at the end of the day is our motivation. We want to do this for the people that are there who will never know, for their family who will never know, but it's also a way for us to just express our love and our service to the Jewish community of that town, whether it's still around or not. And so we do our work mainly through two ways: cemetery restorations and commemorations. And we do work with a lot of partners. Most of them are located in Poland. And so we don't just drive by a cemetery and go, that one needs us, let's start. You know, there are things that we do. And so we work with places like the Foundation for the Preservation of Jewish Heritage. They, quote unquote, own a lot of the cemeteries. And so we will work with them if we want to go into a new place to work. We also have a great relationship with the Rabbinical Council of Warsaw. The chief rabbi of Poland, Michael Szudrik, he's a friend of ours, which is really random to say that the chief rabbi supports our work, and he's a dear friend and supporter and encourager of our work. And so we work through whoever that owner of the cemetery is, if you will. And we also work with the local government because we want to have their blessing to come into their town to work for a week. We also invite them to join us, either by sending students to work with us, providing a porta potty for the workers if needed. I mean, we ask for their involvement, and we definitely want them involved because at the end of the day, we're gonna come home and we want them to continue caring, see the importance of the cemetery, the importance of this culture in their town, and we want them to care for it moving forward. It's not always easy to start a project. We do meet with resistance. Our president, Stephen Reese, he usually starts these conversations and stewards these conversations for us. And there's been times he's had those conversations and there is a lot of resistance and he doesn't know why. Other times it's very clear that that town might have a lot of underlying anti-Semitism. Sometimes he knows just to walk away. It's not worth it. But other times he just feels like, no, we need to keep going. And in all honesty, one of our most successful projects in the last I guess this was our third summer, in Forshuha, we had a lot of resistance. We were almost to the point of backing out of doing the project, but Stephen and then the other partners we were working with kept moving forward. And we've been there 3 years now. The town loves us. They're taking care of the cemetery. So we do have some success stories that's very encouraging. Here's just a look at some of the cities that we've worked in. We have been in other places. This is just a few of them. We have done one project in Ukraine. We have a partner in Ukraine. And so we did do one project there, but our work is focused in Poland. We sometimes get inquiries for other countries, but our resources and connections are in Poland. And so just a smattering of some of the places we've been. To date, we've conducted 45 projects and we've worked with over 25 volunteers. And a lot of the projects, we do go to a city multiple times just because the scope of the project's so big. We need to go back a couple years in order to get it done. But we've pretty much, I think, covered all corners of Poland, which we love. And so what a typical project looks like is basically heavy yard work. You may have done this past weekend in your own home. You know, we use weed eaters, we use loppers, rakes and chainsaws. We're clearing vegetation, trees that are maybe have fallen over or might be threatening a Matzevah or a headstone or blocking paths. And so it's a lot of just using normal equipment that we use in our own home. Probably the biggest task we do is what we call lopping and dragging, and sometimes even with chickens. The chickens were in the cemetery in Rohatin, Ukraine, and y'all, they had grown some big chickens in Ukraine. I mean, they were awesome though. It was like the most fun. But most of the time it's just clipping bushes and small trees. And there are guidelines on what you can and cannot do in a Jewish cemetery. And Stephen has been trained in that, and so he has passed that training on to us. And so we do abide by the halakha on that. And that's honestly one of the reasons why our organization has found favor with some groups in Poland, because even though we ourselves are not Christians, or we are Christians, but we're not Jews, this is their cemetery, this is their land, this is their people, and we are serving them. And so we want to do what's right by them. And so because of that, there's certain things we can't do. We don't just grab a handful of weeds and yank them up, because that would be disturbing the earth too much. We don't take a shovel and dig up something, because again, disturbing the earth too much. We don't trim trees or branches that are really bigger than your wrist. Again, so there are things that we can and cannot do, and there's things that slow us down because we can't just yank something up, but again, we do it because that's the custom, and we want to honor that. And so with all of that lopping and dragging, that vegetation has to go somewhere, and so there's a lot of walking back and forth with our green waste, and so we definitely get our steps in every day. And so we either put it in a pile for the town to come take the green waste away. Sometimes towns provide wood chippers, and so they'll have gentlemen there to run the wood chipper. And so yeah, it's just basically heavy yard work. And one of our favorite parts, and again, speaking for Elaine, is when we can clean the Matzevah. Sometimes we'll take time to clear dust or dirt or moss that have grown up over a Matzevah. We will flip them over if they've fallen over, again, if it doesn't disturb the ground too much. If a stone is buried too much, we leave it. But we love flipping stones over, even though we don't read Hebrew. There's something still about seeing, you can identify the name, and there's something about seeing the name. And I know people may think I'm crazy, but whenever I do that, I clean out the name and I just say, "Welcome back, friend," because it's something about bringing a name back to life. Again, we don't know who this person is, but their family does, God does, and that's important to us and to them. And so we love always taking time on each project to clean some Matzevah and bring those names back to light. And something that occasionally happens, this happened on a project Elaine and I were on a few years ago in Oswiecim. You might know that town by its German name of Auschwitz. And so it's in the southwest corner of Poland near Krakow. But we were working one day and a gentleman contacted the Auschwitz Jewish Center, which is our partner there, and said that he had some fragments of Matzevah he wanted to return. And we don't ask questions, we just say yes, you know? And so he even used a truck, hired a truck to bring them. And so if you remember what I said, the Nazis would destroy the cemetery and those fragments would show up in all kinds of places. And people even today are still finding, they're clearing a back field or they're about to tear down an old barn. They see fragments of Matzevah. And so a lot of times people are very kind and want to bring them back to the cemetery. Other times they're not. They want to negotiate, they want money. And we don't do that. We just say no. And we encourage them to say, this isn't yours, it belongs here, you should want to give it back. But if there's resistance, we don't enter into that because that's not our role, and we'll let the town do that if as needed. But here's just some before and after pictures. Again, this is in Oswiecim. And so this is kind of what the cemetery, we have been working there several years, and they occasionally have other groups come in. And so it's not nearly in the shape that it is every year when we go as it was in the first few years, but you can just see how hedgerows are grown over just the tall grass. The first few years we worked there, there was a lot more bushes and trees, so it was a lot more boogery, as my granny would say. But it can still get really overgrown. But even just after a couple of days of work with weed eaters and just good work, you can quickly start making out the rows of Matzevah. And I'm just, again, seeing the names and the lives. And again, in this particular cemetery, the Matzevahs are not with the right bodies because this one was completely destroyed and all the headstones were pulled up. But over the years, since the war, the headstones have been brought back or they were erected, but they're not wherever the body is. And so this is one that we know that we may be looking at a grave of someone named Marta, but the chances of that being Marta is probably very slim. And so the other big thing that we do are commemorations. And so this can be a commemoration of a cemetery where maybe a new gate or a new fence was put in. Just anything that helps renew the focus of that area for the town to reinforce the importance of that area. Sometimes we help with mass grave commemorations. And actually this picture is from a mass grave commemoration. And we like to invite the local community to join us when we have these ceremonies. We always strive to have an I can never say this word. Thank you. Thank you, teacher, our educator. And we always want to have, a priest and a Jewish representative there. And this is a picture that we always laugh at because this is like the setup of a really bad joke because we have a priest, a rabbi, and a preacher walk into a bar kind of thing because our president took the picture. He's a Baptist preacher, or he was back in the day, and so this picture always makes us giggle. But the gentleman bending down in front of the memorial stone, that's Rabbi Shuderich. So he's the chief rabbi of Poland, and we always love it when he's able to join us. And then as you can see, the gentleman, there's two priests there, and the Catholic Church in Poland, they do support the work, and they're open to having, they want to have good dialogue with, their Jewish neighbor too, so that's always encouraging. And then this is a picture. This is one of my most favorite pictures. Our President Stephen was a photojournalist before he moved to Poland. And don't know the story of this lady, but she's definitely old enough that she was probably a child when the war happened. And so you just wonder, does she know about this mass grave that was there? Does she know the stories about what happened? And I just think it's a powerful picture of her laying the memorial stone on top of the bigger marker. And this is another type of commemoration we do. This was done several years ago in Volbrum. The gentleman in the front with the Navy shirt on, his name is Albert. He and his family live in Australia. His family was from this corner of Poland, and a lot of them were killed during the Shoah. But Albert had worked for many years to find a way to commemorate his family, the city, and the Jewish life of that city, as well as the cemetery. And so he found Stephen in our organization by Googling, I think, and together we helped him create this headstone. And so this is a picture, this is proof that Hitler didn't win, because we have 3 generations of a family that shouldn't be here, but because Hitler didn't win, the Narcissus family lives on for many generations. And so we love this family. They're very dear to us and very encouraging to us. And this is another commemoration. We work with a partner, and their sole focus is locating mass graves throughout Poland, or hidden graves. So whether it's just of 2 people or 52 people or more, they have ways to find mass graves that aren't known. They either talk to local people who remember seeing something, or their parents saw something. They also use ground penetrating radar to find these. And so we work with this organization to place these wooden Matzevah to help mark the mass grave, and again to bring, it's a way to remember and honor the people. And so just looking at the time, all right, I'm going to make sure y'all are awake. We're going to do a test. We don't know Hebrew. Occasionally we have partners with us that know Hebrew, so whenever we have one, we're like, what does this one say? What does this one say? They're like, would you let me work? I'm like, no, I want to know what it says. And but you can still tell a lot about a person based on the symbol that is on the headstone. And so we're going to test your IQ. And so here's one. If you see hands on a headstone, that especially in this position, do you know, is it male or female, and do you know anything about?
Can I be your spoiler and everything?
Yes,
Let me guess.
she got it. Yeah,
Oh,
she got it.
She's a sign of a Kohen,
Yep.
high priest.
Yep, they are.
and
Yeah.
any Trekkies.
Yep.
That's where it came from.
Yep.
Anything to do with the force.
Not the force.
It's done like this.
Mhm.
Jean's tour of the Jewish.
Oh,
Yes.
nice.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
And I took
Yes.
a picture because it was not like any other hands
Yeah.
I've seen on
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
cemetery.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, so she was right. This person is a descendant of Aaron in the lineage of priests, and is definitely a male, and so well done.
His name is Yaakov Yehuda.
Now you're just showing off. Well, it's good to know, because this is honestly one of my favorite ones. This is in the Osvencham Cemetery, and I've been to Osvencham 3 or 4 times, and for some reason, this is one of my favorite ones. Like, it's just lovely. So I love that I now know his name, so thank you. Here's another one. This one could be harder to see, but it's a pitcher. Whenever you see a pitcher or a jug in a bowl, do you know male or female, and then anything about it? Again, think about the days of the tabernacle and the temple.
The high priest.
This is a male, and so they would be a descendant of the tribe of Levi, because the Levites, when you think about their role in the temple, they were the ones who helped with the cleansing and the sacrifices. You don't see that one often. I think the hands we see the most, and this next one we see often, is a lion. You know what that one would be?
Judah.
Gold star. Yeah, descendant is of the tribe of David. I love seeing the lion ones. This next one is one that is can be heartbreaking. Whether you see it's a tree that's broken or maybe a branch of a tree. Do you know what this one is?
Or a tree stump.
Or a tree stump. Yeah, we
It's
have
for
seen the stump.
somebody who died young.
Yep, it's either somebody who died young, or I've heard it also explained that they just died in the prime of life. So maybe they were in their 20s or 30s. And
The
so
last name is Bernstein.
nice. This one is from Oat Folks. So this was in the first cemetery we worked in. This next one may be really, really easy. It's a candelabra. Would this be male or female? It would be female. Who's the person that lights the Shabbat candles? It's the wife or the mom. And so we know that it's a woman that's buried here.
Tova. Her name's Tova.
Tova. All right. I even have a prize for whoever gets the next one. A Matzevah t-shirt. This one is hard to see, but you keep your mouth shut.
No.
If you look closely, you see a hand and a knife or a scalpel. Any idea who was buried there?
Oh, I have an idea.
Yeah, circumcision.
Yes. It's the moil.
Wait a minute, I don't really want this.
It says moil.
Does it?
Yeah, Mem, Vav, Hey, Lamed is moil.
I've only ever seen one of these.
I never even
This was
know.
in the Oka. This was in the Okapova, the really big cemetery. This is the only one.
Yeah. And that's a tall one too.
It's
right?
very
It's
tall.
way at the
Yeah.
top, yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I look for these all the time because it cracks me up, and this is still the only one I've seen.
Next time I go back, I have to find it.
Yeah. So good job, y'all did well. And so just a couple more slides, but our nonprofit's registered in Atlanta, but we are, because most of our board lives here, we are very grateful to both the Gordon Jewish Community Center and the Nashville Jewish Film Festival. We've been part of some of their events over the years, and we've done the Jewish Film Festival twice, and then a couple years ago, the JCC invited us to be a part of their Sukkot art exhibit, their Under One Roof exhibit. If you never have been to that, I highly recommend it. They do it every year. There's always a theme, and they invite nonprofits and schools and I think the police office is there. I mean, all kinds of people. Here's a theme. What does that mean to you and your organization? And so we were able to tell our story there, and that was just a beautiful night for us to be a part of. And so if you want to stay in touch with us, we are on, Instagram and Facebook. But so yeah, that's the really quick rundown of what we do in Poland, the high level view. But happy to entertain any questions you might have, or anything you're wondering. Thank you. And Elaine can help me too, and if I don't know the answer, we'll make something up.
I have a question. Do you ever utilize goats to clear out the lower area? Is that not allowed?
We've actually talked about that, because I mean, there are things that, you know, we work so hard for a week or whatever, and we're like, we know it's just gonna grow right back up, you know, kind of thing. But again, I don't think we've ever heard of a community bringing in goats or sheep. But I mean, sometimes you're like, can we not just toss, you know, pesticides out, or, you know, plant killer out? And again, because there's just so many things that, from some sources they say yes, other sources we say no, and so we just default to no, because again, we don't want to do anything that would, you know, not sit well with people. And unless the chief rabbi said we could or could not do it, then we just choose not to do stuff. And so, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
How often do you go over there?
Every summer, our organization has anywhere from 6 to 10 projects. Like, we usually go on a trip a year. Our president, Stephen, he's usually over there for most of the summer, so he just fluctuates between projects. And so most of our work happens over the summer, because that's when we can get volunteers to come and students are out of school. I think next year we may have one more in spring, but most of the time it's, you know, 6 to 10 projects a year.
For how long?
The work week is usually anywhere from, well, it's usually about 4 days, because we don't work on Shabbat. Or we'll stop at like lunchtime on Friday. So depending on the scope of the project, if there's not a lot of work needed, we can be done by Wednesday. But most of the time it is a pretty full week, to where we start. Sometimes we've started on a Sunday and we'll go up to, you know, Friday at lunchtime, just because there's so much to do. It's just heavily overgrown and stuff like that. But again, if we have a lot of volunteers and have all of our tools ready to go, it can go pretty fast, especially if there's a bunch of young people with a lot more energy than us to do it. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Well, there are different rules about what you can and can't do. So disturbing the ground, what is that about? Do you know?
We just don't want to do anything that might disturb bones that are below, because we have worked in cemeteries where the bones have worked their way up. And if we do find them, again, because we have favor with the Rabbinical Commission and the chief rabbi, if Stephen, our president, is with us, he has been told that he can rebury them. But we also, if there's a priest or a rabbi in the area, we will ask if they will come to rebury the bones, because we want him to. Elaine was part of one, I think her very first project. We just kept finding bones all over the place. I mean, some of it ended up being animal bones, but a lot of them weren't. And a rabbi was coming anyways towards the end of the week. And she was able to just stand off and watch, you know, him rebury it. And he said a prayer. And it was just, Elaine said, it was just a very special, holy moment. So that's a moment we want to honor. And so I'm like, I would never do that myself, you know, but Stephen has been given permission to do that. And so that's, yeah, we just don't want to do anything that would disturb the grave. Yeah.
And not cutting a tree that's bigger than your wrist, is that because of your capabilities, or is that
Yeah, sometimes it is. No, especially towards the end of the week, we have nothing left to give. But no, I can't remember the specific reasons, but there was like again, it's not, again, if anybody knows, I don't want to misquote the halakha, but it's just not taking too much new life out.
Trees are actually very revered in Judaism. There's probably 100 references to trees throughout our texts. So, and one of them specifically is like in war, that you cannot just clear cut trees. So I don't know the specific one on the cemeteries, but that's, I would suspect it's derived from one of our laws.
Yeah, I just know they told us that early on, and we've never strayed from it.
And it is also more difficult.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sure a lot of records were lost when the synagogues were destroyed. So do you find that the towns, especially the smaller ones, go in and catalog things after you've been there?
The towns don't. However, there are organizations, and one of our partners, the Foundation for the Documentation of Jewish Cemeteries, back when Elaine and I first started going, they were just getting going in their work. But they have covered a ton of cemeteries. And if you go to Poland now, and if you walk into a cemetery and you see, it looks like it's just written in chalk on the back of the Matzevah, number 72 or whatever, you can then go to their website and go pull up that cemetery and go, if you're looking for someone in particular, they've documented everything. And so the local towns normally don't do it, but this organization does. And so it's still an ongoing project because, again, there's 1,200 cemeteries. But so there is an online website. And so a lot of the inquiries we get from our website is people like, my family's from this cemetery. Have you worked in there? And do you know where this, grave is? And we're like, no, but we give them the website and takes it directly to that cemetery. Then they can look, because there's photos of each headstone and then the name and as much detailed information as they could discern from the headstone. Yeah, yes, ma'am.
I may have missed this, but originally you said, I believe a minister felt called to do this, and he is now in Atlanta. And how long ago was it, and is it still connected to religious organizations, or is it freestanding?
Yeah, yes, Stephen is back home. He was living in Poland when he first went to that first cemetery, and he was working there as a church minister and church planter. He came home. He and his family moved back to the States, and we are a Christian. The members of our board are Christians, but there's nothing in our code of ethics that talk about our Christianity. We don't proselytize, but our hope is that our love of our neighbor, our love of our faith, and for us, our love of our Messiah, Jesus, is reflected in what we do. But we do not proselytize. We don't. We don't sit there and introduce ourselves. Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm a Christian. I'm here to clean the cemetery. Kind of thing. It's, we just. It's part of who we are, but we don't just, it's not in our code of ethics to broadcast that, if you will. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
How can you document the mass graves, though?
Yeah, we don't do those as much. We support those who do, because they're the ones that do the research. They're the ones that conduct the interviews. Of local people who either saw something where their parents just spent decades telling them about what they saw, or they have the equipment to find if there's a mass grave. There are some cemeteries that we work in that do have them, and you can kind of see the ground just looks different. And so if you have a pause of we wonder, we might do a little research, or somebody in the area may say, yeah, there's a suspected mass grave there. And if some of our partners are in the area, they will come either while we're there or later, and we'll investigate it just so there's an awareness there. And so maybe later there can be a commemoration to mark that specific spot. But there is a lot of research and conversations and interviews that go into that. And while we don't do that ourselves, we work with people who do, and we support them. We help fund some of those memorial markers that go up and things like that. Yeah. Yes, sir.
What about your, obviously most of the tombstones go up into the 1930s when the Holocaust occurred, but what is there kind of an average age to a lot of the tombstones, and then what's the oldest one you discovered?
I feel like Osvencham is probably the oldest cemetery that we've ever been in. Osvencham had a lot of towns, depending if they're big enough. There's what they call an old Jewish cemetery and a new Jewish cemetery, because they needed two. But the one that you can see in Osvencham now is the new. But I think the earliest, I'm remembering the first burial there was 1750 something, I think. And the last burial there was right before the war. And there was somebody buried there right after the war. I've seen pictures of that in that book. But so I think the oldest we've seen is in Osvencham in the 1700s. Yeah. Yes.
I have always heard that Poland is an extremely Catholic country. So what is the current condition of the Jews who live there now?
Yeah, it's pretty much 99% Catholic, and we've been told the quote, if you are Polish, you are Catholic, and to be Polish is to be Catholic, I think is the saying. But because there's only about 25,000 Jews, there are some established Jewish communities. I think there's 6 total. Krakow, I think, is the biggest and most active, and so they do have some synagogues that are active every single day, every single week. But then there are, I think, 5 others. But it's nowhere near what it was. I mean, you can travel a lot of Poland and never see anything Jewish, today, which is heartbreaking. But yeah, most of the country is Catholic. There is, just like here in a lot of other places, we've seen it just in the years we've been going, a rise in anti-Semitism in Poland. And again, like in many places, especially in Europe. And so that's always a concern, and that's something we watch closely and we want to be aware of, and just to, tread lightly and, again, know where we're welcome and where we're not, kind of thing. So, yeah. Yes, sir.
Do the Catholics take care of their cemetery?
Oh, they're beautiful. I mean, it's like so beautiful that in my first few years, like, it just made me mad. Like, honestly, it just made me mad. Because you would drive by and they're huge and they're gorgeous. They're well maintained. The gates pristine. Again, no harm, no foul. I'm like, I want my cemetery that I'm one day put in to be well cared for. But yeah, and like the first time we worked in Oak Oaks, there was a big Catholic cemetery that we passed to get there. And so every day we would just pass this beautiful thing. We would go 2 blocks down and we'd see this one back in the forest that nobody cares for. And it just makes you mad. I'm like, I can appreciate you wanting to care because, again, most everybody's Catholic. So, I mean, I appreciate that. But it's also, why don't you care about, even though they're not of your faith, it's still your neighbor, kind of thing. Yes.
Did you ever find, in the abandoned graveyards, did you ever find one grave that was being tended?
Yeah, occasionally it happens. The first year I went was in 2007 to Oak Oaks. And we went back, your first year, 2009, just to visit. We weren't working, but we were in the town for something, and we went by to visit. And we pull up, and there is, back in the day, the headstones were painted. They would be painted with artwork or just painted white with the names, with the inscription in black or multicolors. And there was one that had been, and it stuck out. Like, it was sitting there beautiful. The edges of the stone had been redone. The Matzevah that was standing up had been painted white with the black lettering. We just stood there and, I think half of us cried because, that's what we want. We want people to reclaim, that space in their family's, person, if that's their person. And so occasionally it does happen, and it's, doesn't happen often, but it does happen. Yeah.
If I could, I don't know how many of you were here a couple weeks ago when I spoke about my trips, but to fill in my experience with this organization, I've never done one of their actual hands-on work, but in my grandfather's hometown of Nashville, they had projects, I think it was 2 years.
Yeah, I was on one of those.
And my first trip to Poland was 2018, and ahead of that, a friend saw their documentary film at the Nashville Jewish Film Festival, and she sent me the information. I was just stunned. There's this organization right here in Franklin that's doing this work in Poland. I couldn't believe it. And then I found out, and they'd actually been to your family's town. And one of the things that you need to understand in terms of the conditions of these cemeteries is that the Nazis intentionally destroyed the cemeteries. They didn't want to just wipe out the existing Jewish population. They wanted to eliminate any memory that the Jews ever existed. So in Nashville, they removed all the headstones and they broke them up and they repurposed them as building materials. And in Nashville, they were used to build a runway for airplanes. And when the author of the book about the town, Glenn Kurtz, when he took his first trip there, a town history teacher, a high school history teacher, took him very secretly to where this was and showed him some of the tombstones. So in many, many of these places, you're really just talking about a forest where it's known that this is where they were. So I don't know. There are some fragments of that one that have been recovered. And after that trip, a second cousin of mine sent me a picture, I think I showed it in my presentation, of my great-grandmother's tombstone from that cemetery. It's about 9 or 10 feet tall, and it had the black with the white lettering, all these biblical verses and who she was and her lineage. I also found out from the organization that Rachel mentioned, the documentation of the Jewish cemeteries. I researched my family. There's a good dozen members of both my grandmother's and my grandfather's side, people buried in that huge cemetery in Warsaw, Okapowa. And my second trip, I got a guide, a Polish gentleman who changed his profession from tourism to being a Jewish cemetery researcher, again, a Polish Catholic. And he works at the Polin, the Jewish museum there, and you have to have a guide to get to many of the places in this cemetery because it's kind of incremental. You know, they started with a certain plot of land, so those are sections 1 through 10, but then they would add, you know, 10 through 15 over here, but then they would get a piece over there that was, so it's really difficult to find them. And a lot of them, even in that big one, even with the projects, there's still a lot of places that aren't accessible. But so it's just a wonderful thing. And my experience on both my trips was that there are a lot more Polish people who are looking for the reconciliation. They are trying to recover the memory of their Jewish neighbors and honor them. I really received a wonderful welcome on both my trips. And my mission with this is to encourage other descendants to reach out to, you know, their ancestral land and to try to do this bridging and reconciling with the people who, you know, live there now.
Well, I know the Tennessee Historical Commission has a person named Graham Perry, and his charge is to document and guard every cemetery in the state of Tennessee. It's a really tough thing, but it's a government program, and he's got a website. There's a cemetery. I wonder if that's being done in Poland.
Yeah, that's what this foundation for the documentation, their name's like a mile long. Their goal is to hopefully document every single cemetery they can find.
There's two. There's one for the preservation of Jewish heritage, which includes any synagogues or any other memorials, and then the documentation of the cemeteries.
Yeah.
So there are two. They're quasi-governmental.
In Tennessee, you know, if you deface a cemetery and try to move tombstones, it's not allowed at all.
Yeah, not so much in Poland. Not yet. I mean, we've had, that's one of the ways that you see that anti-Semitism is somebody will spray paint. A few years ago, we had just left. We were in Czestochowa 1 week, and a couple weeks later, somebody had spray painted a swastika on the main gate. And the beautiful thing about that was somebody notified us of it like the next day. And our partner that we work with, he lives in Israel, and he was notified of it and was sent pictures, and he had sent them to Stephen, who then forwarded it to us. And within like 48 hours, the local town people had cleaned it up. And so, I mean, that was just so encouraging, because I'm like, you could still faintly see it, but the fact that, you know, this was done in their town, they were not pleased. And so a handful of people came out and took care of it. And that was such a victory, you know, it was just so encouraging. So yes, there are people who are out to do harm, but there's way more people who are out to do good. And so that's just always encouraging, especially in countries where, you know, this history has happened. You know, it just gives us good motivation to keep going. So, yes, ma'am.
Has there been any effort to fill up those tombstones that were in the airplane field?
I think because I went to the field, and they were pulled up because they weren't there when I was there in 2017. And so, whenever they do find them like that, I mean, the effort is always made, but I'm like, you have to go through whoever owns the land, because even though it's not theirs, it's their land. And so all kinds of red tape you think shouldn't be there, but it is.
But
Yeah.
What they do up
Oh,
there. They identify it.
well, then, you know, then that's another project of the commemoration, right? So there's a thing called the lapidarium, and that's a place where you can store and display tombstone fragments rather than, you wouldn't try to replant those back in the original cemetery.
Yeah, a lot of places, like in Oswiecim, there's places in Krakow. There's a beautiful wall in Krakow in the Jewish quarters in Kashmir at the Rimu Synagogue. If you go in, they have a beautiful cemetery, but their whole inner wall is nothing but fragments. And it's
Yeah.
gorgeous. It's so moving. Because I'm like, exactly what do you do with them? You still want to honor them, even if it's just bits of, I mean, it's gorgeous.
In the town where my dad was born, Matzevah, they have an amazing memorial. It's the menorah, you know, the 6 candlesticks, and all the sides, it's huge, but all the sides are all fragments that they found. There was projects there, early survivors from the town actually started commemoration within like 5 years. So that cemetery is in much better shape, although there's very few, there's no full headstones there. It's fragments, but they are.
But what a great use of those.
Yeah, I'll show you a
Yeah,
picture
yeah,
of
yeah.
the big one in, well, there's 2 of them in Oswiecim.
Oh,
Well, I do have removed, I can't remember what year that was, so that'll take me
Yeah,
longer.
that was
But the
phenomenal.
the way that a lot of these are done is kind of like what was done in Oswiecim. Let me find that picture really quick. Maybe I'm not finding it really quick. But it's like this huge thing, like this kind of 3-tiered thing, and it's just covered in headstones. And people leave candles and prayers there, and it's very beautiful. And we always make sure to clean that, and weeds get in that, you know, so we make sure we clean that too. So, but thank you so much. We are, I think, pretty much at time, but thank you so much.